I'm not going to spend my time chasing ambulances in the UFO scene. I think there are plenty of people out there who are doing a fine job of that. Personally, I find it way more interesting and compelling to take a look back at some of the cases that might not have gotten enough attention. A cold case, a UFO cold case, if you will, from an issue of UFO Report magazine in 1976, a 13-year-old boy was regressed hypnotically into going back to his alleged abduction, where he was taken aboard a craft and studied by what seems to be these extraterrestrials. I thought it was a really, really interesting case. And
you've got the pangolin wet market theory around COVID's origins, the whole Saddam Hussein had WMDs thing, the suppression of the Hunter Biden laptop story, calling ivermectin horse dewormer when hundreds of millions of people take it a year. I could go on for many days. But the Wall Street Journal just released an article called "The Pentagon Disinformation That Fueled America's UFO Mythology" that truly takes the cake. I have to say, I agree with aspects of the headline. The Pentagon is running a UFO disinformation campaign. I think this article is part of that disinformation campaign.
sDm Files, episode 19. Thanks for being with us. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, share with all your friends. Most definitely leave a comment. Come find me, x.com/shotdownmine. We will do the thing.
There's so much gold in these old books and magazines, and, you know, often history tends to repeat itself. I'm sure a lot of people who've been following UFOs and aliens in the past 50 years have said this time and time and again, that it seems to be just the same thing over and over again. You know, there are no new revelations. We can talk about Matthew Brown tweeting this really cryptic sort of tweet denouncing these special access programs and these esoteric sort of depictions that he put out there. Or we can talk about this Wall Street Journal debacle where they said the entire UFO community is just one big psyop and that the military actually put out fake UFO stuff to cover up the special access programs. Or we can talk about another alleged whistleblower who came forward on 4chan talking about, you know, all of the stuff that's going to be coming out in the future. But folks, the truth is that a lot of this stuff isn't new.
Chris Ramsay, Area52. The aliens took him, but he remembered. The David Seewaldt case. Debriefed episode 41. Now this is actually Chris Ramsay's response to the Wall Street Journal article also. He said he's not going to be a ufology ambulance chaser. Says there's enough people out there doing that. He wants to do a ufology cold case. So this is a little different than like the alien interviews, even though it's very similar. And I really like what Chris Ramsay's doing here. Sometimes it's even a little creepy. You know, he's talked about hypnotizing people in the past and putting people into trances for entertainment purposes, but he's also realized that there can be misuse of that ability also. Because at some point in here, when he's reading the back and forth between the abductee, David, and the hypnotist, it's super hypnotizing. And I'm sure it's on purpose. And I was like, I don't know if I like this, but I kind of do. So it's not really, there's not really an alien interview going on here. It's an alien abduction. David's abducted. And then, you know, in the aftermath, he's being hypnotized to, what do they call it? You know, regress. So he can kind of like relive everything that happened. The doctor asks him questions like, what's going on now? Open the door. Tell me what you smell now. What's happening here? The guy, the David goes on to tell, his experience of being kidnapped by extraterrestrial beings and subjected to physical and psychological experimentation. The experimentation part I didn't really catch on to too closely, but he basically describes being beamed up and put into a trance somehow, and then being beamed up into an alien ship, operated on. And then the hypnotist, talks to him about, well, how do you know that this is like an operation room? Like, why would you describe it that way? Have you ever been operated on before? And the guy told him that he had. And so then he takes him through that he regresses him. He takes him through the hypnosis of reliving the operation earlier to see if there was any details that were the same. If he was basically just reliving, if his alien abduction was David just reliving his traumatic operation experience from earlier in his life. And kind of even Chris seems to say that the hypnotist is trying to make it seem like, is trying to lead the witness, David, into basically coming to that conclusion that, he was just, and the rest of us also hearing the story, coming to that conclusion that he was just traumatically reliving his traumatic experience of being operated on. But the story that Chris Ramsay is reading says otherwise. And then he goes into some other, what he called in here, like related cases that have some compelling related cases. So a little bit more than the first half is this guy going through his story in great detail, which is really kind of like a classic alien abduction story. He's beamed up and operated on and then put back. And he saw monsters, he saw aliens. And then he goes through some other stories that are similar. People being beamed up and operated on and put back. And the aliens that they saw were similar to aliens that other people saw. So that's kind of what he goes through. And these are older cases. They're not from this decade. They're not from the last decade. They're from, I think, 60s and 70s. So, I don't even know how, we can't call it a classic Area 52 anymore, because he's got like many formats. But it is really fun. It's kind of in the theme of the alien interview, in that he's kind of like reading the story, but what he's reading is not a admitted fiction. It's it's claimed nonfiction, right? It's a first-hand witness account, several first-hand witness accounts of UFOs and aliens. He's just reading through them. So that's fun. And then, like I've been saying, I think he's been taking us through like a magician saying, don't pay too much attention to this right here because this stuff is completely fake. Pay attention to this stuff over here, that's reality. As he's been reading through, alien interview fiction. And so he references back to the alien interview fiction all the time when he's talking about, alien interview nonfiction. Very fun. Classic Area 52. Not very long. This is the debriefed format, even though it typically deals with like what he's calling, fictional material, is fun. It's just him kind of like reading through an old comic book. I like it.
So Jacobs and all these other nuclear base employees, Mario Woods, all of these people that I've interviewed have been hazed for 70 years by our own government. For what? They faked UFOs, harassed these people. In Jacob's case, they blew up his mailbox and fucked with him endlessly.
He gets a phone call one night, he and his wife. The voice says, "Your mailbox alight, what a beautiful sight, you're going down, motherfucker."
A class action lawsuit under the Federal Tort Claims Act. Every UFO witness whose career has been significantly disrupted for their speaking out about this issue, or mental health has been disrupted by optical illusions in the sky or whatever hazing rituals this article is proposing, should be granted millions of dollars for being hazed by our own government.
Jesse Michels, the Wall Street Journal is lying about UFOs. Well, needless to say, Jesse Michels is fired up. He felt so strongly about this that he ripped off a 20-minute response, just fucking going ape about the Wall Street Journal article. He breaks it down into two parts, the hazing part and the Air Force Base attack. And then he says, if this is all true, if it's just about hazing and a secret EMP weapon testing device, then all these people who've been slandered by the government over the last 80 years deserve millions and millions of dollars in reparations for the damages caused by the government. And so that's fun. This is a fun watch. It's only 20 minutes. This is not bad for Jesse Michels. And even clipping in a bunch of different people from a bunch of his interviews, to make his point. Maybe Jesse Michels should do more episodes, more content of this type. Just quick 20 minutes referencing a bunch of his interviews with this type of, quick two-part agenda, which actually turned into a third hidden bullet point agenda, which was his takedown of the Wall Street Journal at the end here, where he says, well, actually, there's this kind of back and forth going on where Carl Nell and some other guy, presidential cabinet member, wrote an article that was supposed to go out in the Wall Street Journal, and it got nixed because the Wall Street Journal had this other attack path planned on ufology. And so he says that's why the Carl Nell article didn't get published back then and had to get published in other publications since, and that it's part of their the axe that they have to grind basically against Carl Nell personally, but also now against ufology because of the fallout with Carl Nell, and that they must be carrying water for the conspiracy, for the cover-up. That he agrees with them, that there's UFO and alien disinfo being put out by the Pentagon, and this article is part of that. So it's good stuff. Jesse Michels, impassioned, direct, succinct. Definitely ufology required at this point. I usually talk shit about Jesse Michels, but lately he's been doing a good job, I have to say. Keep it up, Jesse Michels.